Hello, testing. Okay,
It is
oh there.
on now.
Now it says live. This is
And
a
I've
lot of
started the time.
intimidation because now my screen says live. It's like I'm on real TV or something.
Before you were
Uh,
dead,
Before I was dead. Do I just answer the question now, or do you need to ask me first?
what is your superhero origin story, Aaron?
Okay, my superhero origin story. I would probably say that it happened when we when I quit my job as the radio producer for JSECU Live radio program, and we moved our family to Italy, um, and started new. I would say that was the origin, because what we did is we sold our house, and we took a pallet of our things and brought it over, and basically started fresh and new. And we've been here for about well, over 6 years now. Um, we may be returning back to the U.S. soon, which is interesting. But in any event, I would say that would be the origin story, because coming here, I didn't have a job, um, or anything like that, and so the Lord opened doors and worked hard and met people, and one thing led after another, and now people see kind of the online stuff, and they're like, how did this start? And it certainly certainly wasn't intentional in that way. It wasn't like, oh, I want to go do that stuff online and make all this happen. It more or less happened to me than me happening to it. Like all good superhero stories, right? Because
Yeah.
Bruce Wayne, he didn't ask for his kids to get killed, and I'm pretty sure Peter Parker didn't mean to get bit by the spider, but alas, he was bitten.
True story. So you were not bitten by a radioactive spider.
No. Mm-mm. Not that I'm aware of.
And that was my bet. Huh? So you've currently got like 5 jobs, 5 full-time jobs or
I
something
don't
at the
I
moment.
don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know how many jobs I have. I don't know. Um, that's the thing, we become very monojobistic, right? You have one job, and then on the weekends and in your free time, you escape that life. And we see quotes all the time about people that say, if you look forward to the weekends, or you live for the next vacation, that you're doing it wrong. And I do agree with that. Now, I will say that I do look forward to the weekends, because my weeks are pretty full, and I do enjoy um, downtime to play around and stuff like that. But that is probably has more to do with the fact that even in my free time in the evenings and at night, and during the day, I'm busy doing other things, and so maybe that has more to do with my bandwidth than anything else. But I really think it is true that when um, you have that one job and you're looking forward to not being at work, that that changes things. And so, because I do have a lot of hats, as you've were saying before, um, I enjoy a lot of those hats, and so it doesn't feel like I'm working all those jobs. And not all those jobs are full time, and some of those jobs ebb and flow. But yeah, I've got a lot of irons in the fire right now, and I hope it's just a season, Chris. I hope some things rise to the top more than others, and we'll see how it all shakes out. Or, the truth of the matter is that I I just keep myself busy, and so if I'm not busy like that, then I get bored, and then I find something else to do. And so, in some ways, it's kind of a healthy thing. And then there's that whole theory that you've talked about on ChurchMag about, I forget the guy's name, the theorem where if you have empty space, then you fill it. Um,
Hmm.
and I've been thinking about that a lot lately, as I try to increase my bandwidth and become more organized and get more things done. How am I planning on my day? Am I really maximizing my time? Because I know for a fact, if I think about to my college days, if I started the paper a few days early to get it done a few days early, I never got it earlier. But what I did have was a longer paper. And so I realized that, I was that person that kind of pushed things to the very last minute to maximize my time. So I'm thinking, how can I schedule things and stay ahead of the curve and not get behind, and get more stuff done, kind of create my own sense of urgency on things, so that I don't get, lost in piddly things or obsessing over the wrong sentence. And, how can I work with the way I'm already wired, not how some online expert says I have to be more creative or get more things done, but, how am I wired, understand myself better so that I can maximize my throughput. Because even though I feel like I have too much work right now, do I really have too much work right now? Or do I just need to worry more and figure out how to increase my throughput, as well as maybe even learn to delegate better? So those are some of those thoughts.
Wow. Parkinson's Law, I think, is the one. Like, work expands to fill the time allotted to it.
That sounds familiar, Chris. You, sir, are correct.
Well, it's funny because there's definitely that principle, but then so one of the guys I really like and follow, Sean Blanc, he's last month in January, he did a whole series on margin and like the importance on having that white space kind of where you have like, you plan a period of hard work. I'm not going to use hustle because I know you hate that as well as I do. So I've started using hard work instead.
Right.
So like you have a period of hard, intense work, and then you have like just a space where there's nothing allocated, maybe. And you're like, oh, maybe I'll play a computer game, or maybe I'll something else.
The thing, margin's an interesting thing, and I totally agree. I mean, when I switched, I switched computers and or had to do some updates or something. I wrote about it on my personal blog, and I realized that as a freelancer, as somebody that works for themselves, like that's not something that I planned well. I remember if I was at a typical job and I had to do an upgrade on a machine, like that was just part of my job. That was part of my 8 hours. Like everything else was put on pause, and I worked on that, right? And I got paid to update the computer, essentially. But when you're working for yourself, or you're doing, hard work, or you're an amateur blogger, a pro blogger, a hobby blogger, whatever it is, like if you have to do computer updates or your computer crashes or something happens, like where do you get the time from? Where does that time come from? Like it's all your time, right? And so, in that regard, like margin is really important. At the same time, when your page is full, you have a choice. You can either fill up the margin with work, or you can, kind of force the margin. Like, even though I can be in the week feeling behind or having stuff to do the next week, I really kind of measure like how much do I need to work more on the weekend or have fun? Like I kind of measure it a little bit. And sometimes maybe I'll cut my fun down a little bit, but I've learned that I can't ever completely cut it. So sometimes you have to just be really intentional about your margin. Okay, for instance, I needed to do payouts for the ChurchMag authors and the weekend I was there. And so like I just stopped and I took the time and spent the few hours to make sure that, everyone got their payouts, because that was really, really, really important. And I couldn't push that aside. So, I had to use some of my margin to get that done. And then when I got done, I played an hour or so of gaming on my computer, and that was fun. It wasn't nearly the margin or fun that I normally had on the weekend, but I got some important stuff done. So I think that margin is a great concept, but remember that this is it's not like a real sheet of paper. We're talking about time. We're talking about emotion. We're talking about humans. We're talking about human bandwidth, and all that varies from person to person. And so some of us might get indignant or feel like, hey, I deserve this margin, or I have to have this margin. And it's like, well, what does margin look like, for you? Do you maybe need to maximize, like, okay, imagine you have a sheet of paper and you draw like this great big A with a crayon, and you're like, yeah, but I need more margin, right? I can't even write the name. Well, maybe you need to maximize the main part of your paper better, right? And you wouldn't need to fill in that margin. And so, these are cool concepts and mental pictures when we talk about margin, and I think we all need it. But don't get too hung up on the symbolism and the abstract concept that you lose focus of what you're really trying to do, and that is do more in the time that you have allotted for the activity that you're trying to allot for, whether it be work or for whether it be play. And remember, every person's wired differently, right? Like this idea of having the perfect creative space, or the perfect creative environment, or how to schedule this or schedule that. Some people die with a schedule. So why would you tell them to make a schedule, right? Or some people, people underestimate the process of freeing your mind from your work and letting your mind solve the problem. I mean, that's what I do with, like, a lot of times with web design and logos. I'll work on it, set it aside, do something else. I'll come back to it later, like a week later or something else. And my brain will have either figured out the problem or, come up with something new, that sort of thing. And so sometimes it's just, we get too, rigid people sometimes get too rigid. People who are kind of free-hearted become too free, know yourself and then figure it out. Did I answer that? Was there a question? I started to ramble there at some point.
I think it's all good though. There's I was reading something about the difference between, like, so this was from Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow by I think it was, at least, by Daniel Kahneman, I think is the name. And he had this section where he talks about how there can be a real benefit to allowing your subconscious mind to process big amounts of information. So, like, your conscious mind is really good if you have to, like, do a mental arithmetic or something like this. You need to focus. If you try and leave it to your, like, subconscious mind, it can make mistakes. Like, if you ask someone to do a quick maths problems and you word it a little trickily, then you can trip them up by getting them to use their subconscious mind. But
right.
If you've got, like, imagine if you have to pick like the best color scheme or something for a website, let's say, using web design as an example, and there's lots of different options all flowing around, or like the logo situation. Actually, it can be really good to look at all the information, think about it for a bit, and then put it aside, because your subconscious mind can deal with that in the background and process through that stuff. So I think, like, science kind of backs up what you say. But I think, like, your point about people are different is such a good thing as well, because sometimes, people try and present these, like, this productivity tip is going to change your life. This is the one which will change you from, like, slob to superstar. And then it's like, oh, well, that's all right for you, but, actually, I tried it. It didn't work for me because I'm Myers-Briggs type whatever. Or something.
Right, exactly. Plus, there's not only that, but sometimes things are successful because you're being intentional, right? Like, you're being intentional about being organized. Like, I wrote a blog post about how I was gonna change to-do management system project thingy, and I began to look at it a little bit closer. I'm like, well, actually, maybe I just need to use the one that I already have differently. It wasn't that I needed a new tool, it was that I needed to use the tool that I had. And that's why I think some people jump from, one magical thing to another, is because in the effort to try something new, you are being intentional. And, for some people, maybe it is that new thing that does work better for them. But I think a lot of cases it's because people are being intentional. That's how diets are, right? The reason why that diet's working is because before you didn't care what you put in your body, and now you do. It isn't necessarily that the diet is that magical. It's that you're finally applying some effort, right? And as far as the background process thing goes, I think that's really true. And I think that's what I used to do in college. I would look at the material. I knew kind of what I wanted to write about, and then it would just brew. And then later I would go and then vomit it onto my paper. I mean, that's essentially what was happening, right? And my personality tends to be very rigid. And so what I'm trying to learn is two things. First of all, don't put it off. And second of all, being willing to let it go and then move on to the next thing. Because, like, for instance, a blog post, if you know what you want to write as you know, you can do a blog post, a 300 to 500 word blog post in like 15 minutes easy. Like that's image, that's edit, that's everything, because you're just like blah 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 blah, clickety clackety clack, you're done, right? And it's just
Yeah.
amazing and it feels wonderful. And then you have other blog posts that you're like doing a roundup of an app, and you have to read about the app and blah, you go back and forth, and then an hour later you finally hit 250 words and you're like, okay, well, that's good, and you're done. The reason why it was so difficult is because you didn't really know the information, but you had the deadline, so you had to get it done, right? And so what I'm trying to learn is being able to go look, absorb the information, set it aside, and that's what a project management tool is good for, is you can kind of, it's kind of like a bookmark of where you're at in that. Like I'm trying to figure out the right solution for two different nonprofit organizations to accept accept donations and have reoccurring giving, the possibility of text giving. And so I'm looking at three different options. Now I wanted to gather all the information and then present them with my results like all at the same time. But I could feel that my brain was like slowing down. It was like going in high gear, like it was going into 4-wheel drive. I'm like, okay, I don't have time for 4-wheel drive. So I just set it aside. And so I know I've been thinking about it for the last couple of days. And so I'm pretty sure when I go to look at the information again, I'm going to be like, oh, done, right? Because I did that whole subconscious thing. So I think there's a lot of power in that. So.
Yeah, it's funny because you're saying that, and I'm actually thinking about how I've, like, some of the changes I've made to my writing process a bit more recently. Where, like, for a long time I've done the classic tip of, you keep a notebook, or you write down a list of ideas you have for blog posts, and then you come to them at the right time or whatever, or like draft a layout and then you go back to it later on. And I realized that I'm doing that a lot more recently, actually. Like, I'll have the idea, and then so I have a list of like, oh, here's a list of ideas, and some of those ideas have been on there for a long time, and they're still like, maybe I still don't have enough information for them. I still don't feel like tackling it. But there are other ideas which I have had on that list for a while, and then I attack them, and perhaps I've researched a bit more about it, but maybe it's just that in the back of my mind it's had enough time to process through what the thoughts that I actually have about this idea are. And so then finally when I attack it, it's like, oh, of course it's easy, because I've spent, there's been that time in the background thinking about it and processing through what's right, what's best.
Exactly. In the ideal world, right?
Yeah.
Until you have that deadline.
Right.
Until you have that deadline, whatever that activity or, creative process, which, I mean, every process is a creative process, whether you're writing code or you're doing accounting or you're painting a picture. Those are all creative processes. And so, people hear creative, some people automatically throw their brain into park. Some people throw it in neutral, some put it in high drive, right? We all, have different reactions to the word creative, but we need to realize that creative is far more broad spectrum than we give the word credit for, I think.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think, you can only be creative if you're the artist in the studio, or maybe the graphic designer or whatever, and then they look at themselves working in an office job. But actually, like, the people who stand out in an office job are the ones who view it as an opportunity to show off what they can do, to look at the task and think, oh, how can I do this differently? I remember a while back when I was still in Ukraine, so it must be 4 years ago, I read a book, Linchpin by Seth Godin, the legend that is. And one of his things was like, oh, make yourself indispensable. And the way you do that is by doing something that no one else would do in that position. And so I tried to do that, like at the job where I was, and I did. Like, it got to the end of my time there, I was ready to go, and they were like, please stay on. And it was because I had looked for opportunities to go above and beyond what I was doing. And in the end, I still left, and I'm sure they got someone else in, and I'm sure they did different things. But and I know actually they got someone else to do some of the extra things that I was doing and stuff like this. But I think that's something for anyone, look for opportunities to be creative, whatever you do, to do things in a different way than you should.
Right. Exactly.
Well, I think like my Pomodoro timer. Oh, there's 4 minutes left in my Pomodoro. So how about why don't you just briefly say about like I noticed for ChurchMag you've taken a very different approach in the last couple of years, I think. Like you've stepped back maybe a bit and let other people take over different aspects. How have you found that as a leader of a project and stuff?
Well, I mean, it was always the intention of, ChurchMag's always been a community in the sense of multi-author. It did hit a lull there for a while when it was very one-authored, but that was during a difficult transitional time. But what you're referring to is the back end of it. From the front end, while there probably is more diversity in the authorship than there was at one time, I think a lot of that intention on the front end has absorbed or also transferred to the back, which is a little backwards to how most things go, I suppose. But it was always my intention for it to be that way. Just I never really had anybody that I could lean on or rely on to do things. And as last year, taking on more responsibilities outside of ChurchMag, my bandwidth and time was pressed even more, and so the necessity of needing more help was real. And then we had some other ideas for ChurchMag to do, like there's the church merch and the No Porn for Me project, and it just things weren't getting done. And so delegation and having confidence in other people and trying to pass more responsibilities onto others that were interested in doing it, clearly, people who were not even necessarily qualified, but qualified in the sense that they're creative, smart, intelligent people that I trust will always be trying to do a good job. And that's good enough for me, because you know what? That's all I'm doing. I'm just kind of making everything up as I go along too. I mean, if we're honest, that's what we're all doing. Like, get over this idea that you have to be qualified, because what the crap does that mean? Qualified. Like, be smart, be learned, pay attention, look at successful people and see how they do it and how different, learn to pick out the little bits and pieces that might help you. Be brave enough to try some things, right? I mean, that's really what everyone's doing. Don't let this curtain of us and them and the successful and the unsuccessful. Don't play that game, or don't look at people and think that they got there magically, right? You're not seeing behind the curtain, which is hard work, trial and error, failure after failure. Yeah, don't buy that, man. And so that's what we're doing on ChurchMag. We're just, more people are involved, more people are doing things, and some of that's birthed out of necessity, and some of that necessity goes again. I'm afraid my personality and my type wants to like manage everything, and I'm a little bit obsessive, and I want it just so, and I want it my way, and all these different things. And so I've been learning to really let that go, and realizing that if things aren't just so, and things aren't exactly going the way I envision them to go, either one of two things are happening. Either my vision of what needs to happen is wrong and I need to adjust it because their idea is superior to mine, or there's room for their idea and my idea, or I'm not communicating that vision and that idea well enough, right? So I guess that's the leadership answer to your question. As a leader, it's the ability to listen and to enable other people to be more awesome than yourself, because being leadership isn't about being the awesomest. It's about helping others be awesomer than you, right? That's really what leadership is about.
Servant-heartedness, yeah, definitely. If you want others to be better, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, there's about 5 seconds left on my Pomodoro timer. So thanks, Eric, for doing this. It's been great. Oh, there
Awesome.
it goes.